You've got the bio, so I'll just introduce quickly Libby Klein from Social Impact Legal, John Altmann, Platform Legal, and Stephen Moe from Parry Field Lawyers. And, to illustrate some of the issues around social enterprises, we prepared a skit. Kind of.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hi, I'm Stephen. I made the appointment. Hi.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, welcome to our beautiful law office here.
What was your name, sorry?
Libby.
Libby.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I'm Libby's alter ego, I'm John.
Nice to meet you both. Yeah, thank you for... I'm sorry it was such short notice. I've just arrived in the country.
Not at all.
And I just have these questions about social enterprise. Just need to talk through some things. I understand that you both have slightly different specialties. Is that right?
Yeah, so I'm very big on not-for-profit structures for social enterprises.
Okay, so you're not-for-profit, yes?
Yeah.
And I'm pretending to be all about profit.
Okay, yeah, very good. So my question, so I've just arrived in Australia. What a beautiful country. But I just don't know very much about how I can implement an idea that I've brought from overseas. I've heard the term social enterprise. I'm just not sure what it actually means. So I guess that's my first question. Can you tell me or help me to understand what a social enterprise actually is?
Well, there's no real legal definition of a social enterprise. Some people, for example, here in Australia, Social Traders Australia define social enterprise to be something where there's a social mission, and one of the criteria is that you need to apply 50% of your profits to the social purpose of your organisation. But there's no legal definition of it.
Okay. Well, basically my idea involves something that it's more of a for purpose rather than for profit. That's how in my mind I'm thinking about it. So can I just tell you what that idea is, and then maybe you can help me work out which road I should go down, whether it's a profit road or another way. Basically, when I moved here, I was walking out one evening, and I noticed there were lots of teenagers just kind of roaming the streets. And I just thought, wouldn't it be great if we gave them a venue where they could come, congregate? And that got me thinking, because my background is in the film industry, and I love cinema and film. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if we could build a cinema that the youth of the community could come to? They could watch a movie, and the profits that we made from actually selling the ticket could then go back into community organizations that reach out and help the youth. Is that something that would fit in those guidelines?
Yes, well, it sounds to me like a perfect solution would be a not-for-profit organisation, because you can do the activities, and then, as you say, you want all the benefits to go back to helping kids and their families. So not-for-profit would be the way to go, because you get your tax concessions, you don't pay income tax. If you need investment, you can still get that in the form of a loan. So definitely the way to go would be a not-for-profit.
Okay, all right, not-for-profit it is. That's great.
I don't know about that. I mean, there's charity lawyers, they're a little quick to kind of feather their own nest. I mean, maybe what you need is just a plain proprietary limited company for profit.
Okay.
And what's to stop you giving away some of the proceeds that you make? In fact, you might even write into the constitution of your company that you're going to give away a certain amount or have a certain purpose, and all the members of the company have to agree if that's going to be changed.
Okay.
You'd probably be looking for tax-deductible donations from the public, would you?
Well, I mean, that would be a bonus. I mean, one of the things is that the youth will benefit, and all of the community will see that. Hopefully, they would be wanting to donate something. Yeah. Does that affect things?
Well, our friends at the ACNC might even give you what's called public benevolent institution status. You're helping people with disadvantage, and that way you can access grants from philanthropic foundations and attract tax-deductible donations from individuals, which you obviously can't do, sorry John, with a proprietary limited.
That's true, but you'll have to lodge your accounts, of course, on the great ACNC register and be open for all the world to see about how you spend your money and where it goes, won't you?
Yeah, well, we're very happy to be transparent and accountable.
Stephen might be. Perhaps you could tell us a bit more about your purpose? Like, because when it comes to charity, although I'm for profit, I know a little bit about charities. And when it comes to charities, purpose is everything in terms of whether you get tax concessions, whether you get charitable status. So, what kind of purpose have you got? Just tell us a bit more about it. And
well, I was thinking,
how you think it might work out.
Yeah, I was looking at the youth. I'd like to help them in some way. I was thinking maybe some education, something that would help them raise the standards. Something along those lines. Does that affect things?
Yeah. Have you got any idea about like what kind of youth? Are we talking about like, my son who's a board university student, or are we talking about kind of disadvantaged Indigenous youth?
No, I was thinking sort of teenagers, rather than a specific minority group, if that's what you're asking. It was more broadly defined. Yeah.
So the kind of tax concessions that you might be able to get depend on what kind of people you want to serve or help.
Okay. So I need to go away and think a bit more about which category.
And what about yourself? Tell us how you're going to be involved in this business or in this enterprise.
Well, I was thinking. I'm
like, where are you going to start it from? Like, in terms of where might you get the money? Because we could think about purpose, but if we're talking about the business, we need to think about how are you going to do it? How are you going to fund it?
Well, conveniently, I have an uncle who invested in Facebook. And he
died recently.
How did you know?
I'm sorry to hear it still.
His feet just went up.
So he's left me just enough to cover building the cinema and things. So I'm not so much focused on the funding side of things, but I would like to be the general manager of the enterprise. I'd like to be the face going forward, and I'd like to be involved in the business and that side of things.
So he left you just enough or so much that you don't need money from this venture, or do you need?
Oh no, I need money for sure. I've got the 7 children, so I'll need to provide for them.
What school did you say they were going to? Since you just moved over here?
Oh, we're still deciding. Yeah. Definitely I need to have a good dividend stream coming through to be helping with my, 7 children. Does that?
So that kind of kills the not-for-profit angle.
Okay.
But you still might, in killing the not-for-profit option, you're also killing the opportunity to seek deductible gift recipient status. So
I'm really interested in something you said as well, because I might have another uncle, so it might be okay. Let's go with that for a second. I might be able to be a not-for-profit, but I'm just curious about the perception in the public, but also when I go for funding. What's the difference when I go to, say, a bank and I say I'm a not-for-profit versus I'm a for-profit?
So someone went viral recently on social media saying they thought that actually the definition of social enterprise was a business that's failed. I think social trade in Australia don't agree with that definition, but it is all about perception and the robustness of your business model. So some lenders might turn their nose up at a not-for-profit and not be interested in lending, but others will just go to the viability of the business model regardless of whether it's a not-for-profit or a for-profit and assess it on its merits. So there are issues of perception.
So I might be able to access the grant funding or it's that source of funding, but it might be a bit more difficult to access other types of...
So there's the investment funding, so loans perhaps, that's one issue, but also if you are wanting grants from philanthropic trusts, for example, or from individuals, then they very often require you to be a not-for-profit. So,
do you think you're going to expand this venture? Are you envisaging a kind of chain of cinemas around Australia or the world?
Well, it's a great idea.
It's a scalable idea?
I'd like to think that the idea is good enough where it could be replicated in other centres. Why not? Yeah.
So, if you were to replicate it just by encouraging other people to take up your idea, maybe a charitable form might be really good for that. But if you want to replicate it yourself, you've got to think about how you're going to fund something as opposed to the purpose of it. And the how might, if you need equity capital, then you're going to have to be for profit, pretty much.
Okay. Right.
Whereas if you're a charity, there's nothing to stop you. There's nothing to stop you taking loans, but you don't have shares to sell. You don't have a share in the for-profit piece to sell.
I see what you mean as well. In terms of investors,
Mm.
if somebody said we could do this in other places, it would be difficult to get them on board to.
So you've got to think
there wouldn't
really
be
hard
shares
about
to
the
sell.
mix of where your funding might come from.
Mhm.
Because if it's grant funding, then that typically goes to charities. And if it's equity funding, well, you can only do that in a for-profit
Okay.
venture. But then you've got to think hard about whether you're going to get any grants, whether people believe in the actual social mission in your for-profit that is, you could still take out most of the profit. Or maybe we can limit it in some way
Mhm.
that gives people more confidence to give you grants.
Mhm.
But
Would
you
there
have to
be,
get that
I'm just
distinction.
thinking, like, would there be a hybrid model where I could incorporate both the best of what you've got and the best of what you got in terms of some
What do
kind
you
of a
think? What do you
structure
think?
where
Do
we
you
had...
think we can compromise on this?
Well, if we can bring ourselves to collaborate with each
Yes.
other, perhaps we might be able to have two entities working in parallel with
Okay, well tell me more about that. What would that involve?
Well, so you could do that in a number of different ways, but one way would be to have a proprietary limited company, so a private company running the business, and then it could distribute some of its profits to shareholders, and then also you might have a separate legal entity which might be a separate company, which has the charity status.
Okay.
And, up to a certain point, we might even be able to have money flowing both ways. What do you think, John, about how we might do a hybrid? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it could work because, again, if you go back to thinking about how people like to fund things, if you need a lot of equity capital and you think you can make some return on that, then you need a private for-profit vehicle to do that in. And you could also set up a charity that could own a proportion of that by virtue of setting it up. Other people could fund it, and the charity owning that, of course, would end up with effectively the same tax position as if it started the business and had tax exemptions for its income, because in Australia we have the system, I think you have it in New Zealand too, where you get a refund of franking credits. So if a company pays tax, then if the owner's charitable, the owner's entitled to claim a refund of the tax paid by the company.
Right.
So the net, there's a timing difference about when you'd receive that taxed money, but the net impact might be similar. And your funding streams might come from different places. So you might set up services for youth through the charitable arm that some donors are particularly interested in. So particular kinds of supportive services to do with homelessness or employment training, life skills training, might be all sorts of things that you want to do.
Yeah.
And philanthropic funders might be more interested in funding that and seeing what services are delivered. And you don't necessarily... There's a complicated question about cross-collateralising your risk with donors, if that makes sense to the audience. But to you, if you have a large established donor pool and then you're running a business, you've of course got the business risk potentially attached to your donor pool of money. And if that wasn't people's expectation when they gave the money, that you were running the business, then you get into complex questions about what happens when you start to make losses, what happens to your reputation going forward.
And one thing that you really need to be very careful about is your messaging around the business, and because the main principle being that you need to make sure that you're not misleading people as to, if they're making a donation, what's it going to be used for, and to be very clear, including, for example, around if you're going to promise that the business would send a certain percentage of profits off to the charity, or you need to decide, are you going to explain how you're going to calculate that percentage of profit, what comes out before before 50% can be shared with the charity. that sort of thing.
So it's all about how I tell the story and explain it to the people who are.
That's right.
Yeah. But it sounds like potentially this sort of dual model might work in the sense that I'm able to go to investors and get private investment, but I also have a way to get grant funding. And also, ultimately, my main aim is to do good for the youth. And so this provides a way to potentially do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else that I should know?
Well, happily, John and I have got a large network of
friends who are also
friends who are experts in
Oh,
this
do you?
area.
Yeah.
interested in advising in this area.
Wonderful.
You know,
Well,
they
thank
can
you.
probably add.
Before we turn to them, thank you both very much for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mhm.